Hi, I'm Liv, and welcome back to the Book Nook. Hey guys, so for today's video I am doing the 2017 Book Nook Awards, drumroll, no wait, I should have done the drumroll first. So essentially this video is just going to be my best books of the year, but I thought I would do it by sort of categories, and I've got a few down here. I'm not going to go into super detail on a lot of them, but I will link to videos where I talk about them a bit more if you want to hear more. The reason for that is that there are 18 books in this. So the first one is the best novel I've read in 2017. Now, what I have done, I should preface this and say that my overall book of the year is not in any of these categories because it would have been, but I wanted to, because it was my overall book of the year as well, I wanted to give other books that space. Does that make sense? So my favourite novel published this year is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. I will actually put an image of the cover because this is just a yellow square. So Tin Man by Sarah Winman, I don't think it's fully stuck with me as much as I thought I would, but at the same time, every time I kind of hear it mentioned, or every time I just see a splash of yellow, I get a bit, So clearly it has. And it's just an absolutely beautiful story about love, friendship, relationships, the enduring power of love, and I absolutely adored it. So I thoroughly recommend that one, and oh, I love it. Next category is best debut novel. Now, I was torn with this one. I could have very easily gone with My Absolute Darling by Gabrielle Talon, but I thought although it was the one that sort of had quite a big impact on me, that there were others that were sort of like the best ones. I don't know how to quite explain it, but essentially for my best debut of 2017, I've gone with Sally Rooney's Conversations with Friends. Now I can't find my copy, so here you go. So Conversations with Friends is about two girls who have previously been in a relationship and they make friends with a couple who are sort of relatively famous, and they sort of end up having some form of relationship with one or the other from the couple, and it's just a really interestingly written one. It's so sort of young and fresh and vital, but also clever and doesn't sort of talk down, and there's just something really intriguing about the voice that Sally Rooney sort of writes in and the voice that she imbibes with her characters that makes me really excited for any other writing from Sally Rooney in the future. So for that reason, I've given it my best debut of the year because it's the one that I'm most excited about seeing what Sally Rooney does next. Next up is my favourite novel read this year that wasn't written this year, so read not written in 2017, and that is Carole by Patricia Highsmith. I actually read this on the Kindle and I don't have a physical copy yet, so again, a thingy here shall have to suffice, but this book, I watched the film before I read the book. It's not very often I do it that way around, but because it was up for an Oscar, I watched it not long after the Oscars, and oh my day. Every time I want like a bit of a cry, but like a beautiful cry, I put that film on. And then I decided to read the book, and you know what, for me, the book just has that same magic. It is just so beautifully written and just so moving, and it just gives me the warmer fuzzies, and it's one that's going onto my list of all-time favourite books, and I am just so pleased that I finally got around to reading it after watching the film, and thoroughly recommend reading it. You will notice that Sylvia Browne pages for her and pages for you are not on this list, and for me, they were so close to being sort of on this list, but I think that Carole was kind of the book that those books reminded me of, and it just had this magic to it that I loved it so much that I kind of wanted to put it on this list, this end of year favourites list. So thus it is. I'm a bit sleepier than I thought I was. Next category is Best New to Me Author, and that is Maggie O'Farrell. So this year I read I Am, and This Must Be the Place, and I can't find my copy of that. I think I've lent it to my mum. And I was really pleasantly surprised. Maggie O'Farrell is someone, I've never not read her for any particular reason, I've just never sort of got round to reading her stuff. But I really enjoyed This Must Be the Place, and in terms of her fiction, that has given me the bug to read some more Maggie O'Farrell at some point over the next year. And her memoir, I Am, was so good as well, and her writing, there's just so much sort of emotion in there, but without it being too sort of, oh, I don't know what I mean, I'm very tired. Essentially, Maggie O'Farrell is an author that I've not read before, that I read for the first time this year, that I'm excited to read more of. Best crime or thriller. This may not surprise many of you, but it is He Said, She Said by Erin Kelly. Again, this is the proof copy, so I'll try and hold it up to the light so you can see that there. Yeah, I'm just going to put the actual cover here. I will link down to my video where I talked about this one in more detail, but I just found it was so surprising and so really well done and so powerful. As a thriller, in terms of the plotting and the pacing, it was really good, but in terms of what it had to say and what it was doing, it was just so fantastic, so I cannot recommend that one enough. I haven't read many other thrillers or crime books this year, so you could say it was sort of like a weighted category in that sense, but of the few that I have read, this stood out by a mile. Best translated fiction goes to my boy Yuri Herrera's Kingdom Cons. Absolutely loved this book. Of the 3 Yuri Herrera novels that I've read, and okay, I've read them 2, 3, 1 rather than 1, 2, 3, this is my absolute favourite. It's like a gangland fairy tale, there's mafia, there's magic, it's just absolutely wonderful. Packs a punch in such a short little book, and again, Lisa Dillman's translation is just, oh, amazing. Beautiful, fun, powerful, little but large. Speaking of little, I've also got my best novella of 2017, and I've gone for anything under 150 pages. And my favourite one this year is All My Friends Are Superheroes by Andrew Kaufman. I loved Andrew Kaufman's The Tiny Wife when I read it a couple of years ago now, and I read this one especially as I saw this gorgeous hardback cover in work. I had to have it. Essentially, this is about guys who are all superheroes, as the title would suggest, and Tom has married the perfectionist, but the perfectionist's ex at their wedding hypnotised her into not being able to see Tom, and she's sort of absolutely heartbroken because she thinks he's just left, and no, he's right there. And it's just this really sort of fun but quite touching little novella about him trying to convince her that he's there and trying to make her see him again, and I just absolutely loved it. Andrew Kaufman's writing, as I say, it's fun and it sort of pops, and yeah, absolutely lovely little book, this one. Best short fiction collection now. Now then. Until almost just before I recorded this video, it was going to be Tom Hanks. I don't think that would surprise any of you. But just before I finished recording this, I finished reading Atrib and Other Stories by Ellie Williams. Wow. This is another book, and I think I've said it about a few before, but it's one that when I read it, I find myself simultaneously jealous and in love with it, because it's this crazy mix of, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I want to write, which is exactly the kind of stuff that I want to read. I mean, it's so much cleverer and better done than anything I could do, and hence the jealousy. But it's just so fantastic. It's another one that gets me sort of fired up about writing again, about language, about the possibilities of short stories, about the capabilities of short stories, I should say, about what short fiction can do, about what language can do. These are just absolutely wonderful little stories that play with language and play with form, but they're all just so sort of clever and just got such a twist, and they're so magically readable, and oh, I absolutely love this one. As I say, I have only just finished it, but it's going to be one that stands the test of time just because I just know it is. It's just got that feel to me. It's one of those that fires me up about fiction, about writing, and it's also so readable that it does everything that a short fiction collection, everything you could possibly want from a short fiction collection is in this book. Atrib and Other Stories by Ellie Williams, published by Influx Press, so it's an indie press one. This is one that's on the Republic of Consciousness long list, and go read it now. Best Poetry Collection, no prizes for guessing that it is Cain by Luke Kennard. Again, not read many poetry collections this year. Milena Engelard's Wild Gods, because it was the most recent one, could have pipped this one to the post, but this has just had such a lasting impact on me, and my love for it knows no bounds. It is clever. Again, with form, it's this collection that is a thing of itself as well as being a collection of individual poems. It works as, there's almost like a narrative, well, there's a narrative of the whole collection, and it's just so brilliantly done, so playful, so biting, so perfect in every way. Thoroughly urge you to go and get a copy of this. I've got my lovely hardback, I've also got the paperback as well. It's one by Penned in the Margins, and it's just an absolute rip-roaring collection. I will again link to my video where I talk about this in a bit more depth. Next up, Best Memoir, and there were a few to choose from this year, a few more than I realised, but I'm going with The Red Parts by Maggie Nelson, purely because the story behind it is so interesting, but tonally and in terms of the actual writing itself, it's just so fascinating. Maggie Nelson, a huge fan of her writing in general, and this one, as I say, such an interesting story, and so beautifully done, and the explorations of sort of the history of it, and the now, and the impact on the family, and just absolutely adored that one. Really powerful, but without being sort of really overwrought and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Unnecessary, I think, is the word I'm looking for. Nothing in this is unnecessary. Everything serves a purpose. Everything is pitch perfect, and yeah, thoroughly recommended. Best other non-fiction is a Ta-Nehisi Coates Between the World and Me. I know it's an older one, but again, it's one that I've read this year. Absolutely fantastic. So powerful, so important, so vital. If you haven't read this yet, like I hadn't read it until this year, do yourselves a favour, go and read it. It's like a call to arms of some... Oh no, that sounds really hokey, but it's something like that. It's something that we all need to pay attention to. So go do. Best graphic novel. Again, this one was tricky because a few of the series that I read had their sort of lulls around 3-4 and then picked back up again in the last few sort of issues. But I went for something that wasn't a sort of series because I would find it so difficult to choose, and my memory's a bit fuzzy with them, as always happens with series. So, again, might not be a surprise, but Thornhill by Pam Smythe. You all know it scared the bejesus out of me. You all know that I absolutely loved it as well and thought as a thing, what it does and how it does it, it's the perfect fusion of art and words. So yeah, that is my best graphic novel of the year. I was torn as to whether that would fit in with best graphic novel or best YA. But again, it's a bit of fixing with these categories for me because, you know, there was another book, as you're about to see, that I absolutely loved. That was a YA book. And with the graphic novels, I found it harder to choose a sort of standout single graphic novel. Although all the Tom Golds I absolutely loved, they're not quite the same thing for me. I don't know why. Best YA novel is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is a proof copy. Again, I will link to one of my very early videos where I talked about this, but essentially it is a novel about the Black Lives Matter movement and about a young girl who gets caught up in all of this, and it's just so brilliant. It's another one that I just think everyone should read, and it's so important for a teen novel as well. It doesn't sort of shy away, but it's not gratuitous. It says what it needs to say for a story like this. It gets it so right, and that's what's so wrong. The voices in there are some of the most incredibly pitched voices that I've read in a while, and there's going to be a film of it, and it's just... it's so fantastic. Honestly, it was a while ago I read this one, but it's one of the most consistent books that comes up in conversations, I think, between me and other booksellers and between me and other people in general. It's just one that is so vital that you can't help but talk about it once you've read it. Next up, best children's fiction that I've read this year. Not read too many, but of course, you all know that Pax by Sarah Pennypacker was just by far and away my favourite. I loved it. I loved it so much. I love Pax. I love Pax. I love these illustrations. I love it so much. It's not just an adorable story about an adorable fox. It does say something about friendship and loyalty and persistence and love as well. There's a really good story in there, as well as it having an adorable main character. But most beautiful book, again, was one that could have gone to a lot of books, but has gone, for me, to The Lost Words by Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morris. Beautiful inside and out in intent and in purpose, and that's the same thing, but the way it is sort of married with the form of it, the illustrations, the word, the production of this is just outstanding. As I say, there's a beautiful point to it, this sort of loss of words surrounding nature and how that seems to be sort of falling out of consciousness, so there's an importance for us to it, so it's beautiful in that sense, and also just as a physical object. I mean, hello, do you have eyes? Yes. My biggest pleasant surprise of the year will be no surprise to you, and that is Nigel. Such a surprise to me that I've fallen so head over heels for a cookery writer, for food writing, for that particular book, but also his food writing in general, and now I've got more of his cookbooks, and just, yeah, definitely the biggest pleasant surprise. I was going to put in a biggest unpleasant surprise, but I decided I wanted this video to be a bit more positive, so I'm not going to. Best or favourite prize winner that I've read this year, so it's not necessarily ones that have won prizes this year, but of the ones that I've read this year that have historically won prizes. My favourite is Solar Bones by Mike McCormack. Again, probably not a surprise. Won the Goldsmiths Prize in 2016. Just an absolutely incredible book. Such a me book in terms of it playing with form and its themes and its language. Very up my street. Absolutely loved it. An experience, not just a book. Something you will not forget in a hurry once you've read it, and entirely deserving of winning the Goldsmiths Prize. Now then, the big one. My book of the year for 2017. It's probably not going to surprise many people, but in a way I've been debating as to whether this one would be my winner or could be my winner, because I read it so long ago, and because I've read so many fantastic books since then, and because there's been a lot of talk about it, and then because it won the Man Booker. I've just been sort of debating about it, but then when I sit down and I think about it, and I think about what book have I read this year that I consistently want to talk about, that I consistently think about, that I consistently see, and my heart sort of goes, ah, yes. What book gives me that thrill most consistently to think about, to talk about, to see, to think about reading again, to think about how I read it the first time, and know that I want to read it again soon, and that is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. I thought for each video this one appears in, I would use a different cover, as I have for. But suffice to say, I know that I was predisposed to loving this book because I love George Saunders, and because I just knew that he was going to do something different form-wise. It wasn't going to be straightforward. I know I was predisposed to love this book, so maybe it was rigged in that sense. And I think that's possibly another part of why I've been toying with whether I can call it my best book, because I knew I was going to love it before it existed. But, you know what? It's another one that's a reading experience. It's one where you have to sort of learn how to read it to start with, but once you do, you are under its spell, you are transported linguistically, geographically, temporally. Do I mean temporal? Yeah, physically, metaphorically. It's just such a magical thing, and the fact that it somehow manages to explore grief and love as well as responsibility, and it becomes this novel that's a historical novel that's not a historical novel. It's a novel very much rooted in time that's not rooted in time. It's a novel about timely things that are timeless things. So I thought, to mitigate the fear of it not being as good as it was the first time round, I won't read it straight away, but within January, February. Maybe actually I'll wait until it comes out in paperback again, because I think that's February, March time, and we all know I'm going to get a copy of the paperback. So yeah, okay, when it comes out in paperback, I'm going to reread it. There we go. I don't know, I feel a bit defensive about this book a lot of the time, and I don't know why. Well, because I loved it so much, and because when you do love a book so much, when you read it, as I say, when it first came out, you read it back in, was it February that it came out? January, February? Something like that. You read it so early on in the year, and you fall in love with it so hard, and it's such an experience, and you do have this sort of fight back with some people calling it a bit wanky, a bit pretentious, and yeah, it is, but that's part of it, and it does it in a way that somehow it's wanky but not wanky. As I say, it's all things and it's no things and it's everything and it's brilliant, and as soon as the paperback comes out, I'm going to buy a copy and I'm going to reread it, and I urge you to do the same, or you can pick up a hardback cover. There's 2 different hardback covers, or you can be like me and collect all of them. I just absolutely adored this book. Cannot wait to reread it, but I'm going to, just because of the fear. Absolutely my book of the year, because as I say, it's the one that most consistently I get excited about, to talk about, to think about, so it has to be. So yeah, those are the 2017 Book Nook Awards, essentially my books of the year that I tried to give a funny title. What are your books of the year? Tell me all of them. Write them in a list and post it down below. I should say, I've not been quite my sort of usual as energetic self today, and I felt a bit deflated in this video, because for many reasons that I'm not going to go into, New Year's, not my favourite time of year, so I just find it hard to kind of, so, sorry about that. I'm going to be back tomorrow with my 2018 reading plans video, but I hope whatever you're doing tonight, you enjoy it and you stay safe. Stay safe, please. I'm not going to go into a whole new year, new me, make some resolutions, do your own thing, or don't, whatever thing, just do your own thing, or whatever. I'm off to make a lovely dinner and drink some Baileys in front of the TV, and maybe see if I can squeeze in another graphic novel at the end of this year, and then pick my first book of 2008. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next year. Haha, there's a joke no one's made.